Abbas Tasunti is with the NPA. What is your position there, sir?
So thank you very much. Good morning.
Morning.
I've listened to the stories you've read.
No, I just want to know your position. Like, what are you? Are you the head
Okay,
of?
my position at NPA.
Yes.
I'm the head of economic regulation at NPA.
Wonderful. So let's start with the first story we read. The first story said that the OMCs are now charging. It says gold is going for 14.99 for petrol, 14.80, and it basically talks about the price, the price floor you set. Is that story correct? That you set a price floor that it can't go below? Why do you set a price floor?
Okay, I think that's a good place to start from. So the price floors is one of the recommendations that emanated from the working committee that was put together by the NPA 2 years ago to review the petroleum pricing deregulation policy, which we did from 2015. We had implemented this policy for, I think, 7 years at a time. And a number of issues had come up in the industry, which, as I stated, we look at the policy and see what we can do to make the industry better to serve consumers. So the price floor was one of the things that was proposed. It was to address issues about price undercutting, particularly. If you look at petroleum product prices, we use a formula to determine petroleum product prices. And this formula has fixed costs in there. So you have, for example, if you look at the importer, the BDCs as we commonly call them, their pricing formula takes into consideration the world market price and then the cost of landing that product from the world market into Ghana before you pay for other fixed costs like the discharge fees from the vessel, the storage fees that where you keep the product, there are storage fees, there are several port fees, there are other fixed costs that all of them incur before they add their own margins and then apply the exchange rate. So since we've implemented the price regulation policy, this price build-up are still being used. So the variations we see in their prices comes from the negotiated premiums they pay to their suppliers to bring the product into Ghana. They all use the same world market price because these benchmarks are used. And then add the fixed costs that I have mentioned. And then the margin as a company, you determine which margin you want to use because in a deregulated market, we don't determine what margin a company should add. It's competitive. The premiums they pay to the suppliers are also competitive. When it comes to exchange rate, before price regulation, we determine the exchange rate and apply it to one price for all of them. Under the deregulated market, the importers have their own exchange rate. So you go to your banks, you negotiate your rate, and then that's what you apply in setting your prices. Even though the Bank of Ghana is organizing the FX auctions for our industry, the Bank of Ghana is not able to meet 100% of the forex demand of our people. So usually you get up to around 20%, let me say, of the forex demand. So about 80% of that you have to go to the market. So the BOG rate may be competitive, but that does not give you 100%. So the importers will still use different exchange rates in setting their prices before they sell to the OMCs. For the OMCs too, their price build-up has fixed taxes, levies, and statutory margins which applies. When they sell the product to the consumer, they pay back all these fixed taxes, levies, back to the GRA and to the appropriate account. For them, their variations also come from the margins they add as players. So the price variations we've seen since price regulation is purely because of the margins they add themselves. And for an industry like ours...
how do you arrive at the price floor then?
Yes, so for an industry like ours where there are fixed costs that every company applies to their price, when you see products being sold at certain levels below the fixed cost, then it's a cause for worry. That's where the price and cutting concerns came up. It's a cause for worry because this leads to inability of some of the companies, this we call it unhealthy competition, inability of some of the companies to pay this fixed cost. It leads to debt.
But if consumers benefit, is that not what you are there to do? If somebody is deciding that he's going to get loyalty from his consumers by giving them a low price for a period, yeah, I mean, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, you may look at that and say, yes, it's good for the consumer. But this, like I said, NPA's mandate also is to ensure that you have a sustainable industry. Because if the industry collapses and the products cannot be supplied, then there's no product. Availability will be a problem. NPA is supposed to ensure that there's a sustainable industry to assure availability of petroleum products. So where we see that the industry is operating at levels that are not sustainable, then we have to ensure that to prevent such things. So if companies are selling below cost because of unhealthy competition, which is killing them, then, like I mentioned, the control the player has in the price build-up is the margin they set for themselves. So if you negotiate with your supplier and get a better premium, you can pass that on to the consumer. If you want to have a very good margin, you can pass that on to the consumer. So the price floor, what goes into it is purely the world market price, the benchmark price, which applies to all the companies, and then the fixed cost, which applies to all of them. We leave out the premiums they negotiate with their suppliers to deliver the product to them, because if I'm better at negotiating, I pass that on to the consumer.
I get that point. Let's go to another point. I think 2 weeks ago, the NPA announced that you were reversing the suspension of the price stabilization recovery levy on petroleum products. My understanding of that levy was that it was inbuilt to help stabilize prices, but it's a levy we pay. And you suspended it temporarily to ease the pressure on consumers. So why did you decide to reverse the suspension? So it means you are bringing it back. Why are you bringing it back?
Okay, so this price stabilization and recovery levy is one of the levies in the Energy Sector Levies Act. And this levy has two main purposes. One, the major one is to pay for the subsidies you have on premix fuel. Before it was introduced, government used to have the challenge of subsidizing products and not being able to pay. So in 2015, when the energy sector levies was brought in, this levy was introduced to ensure that when subsidies are accrued, government has a source of fund to pay them. So this has been one of the major uses of the energy sector levies, the price stabilization and recovery levy. And one of the other functions of this levy is it can be used to cushion consumers. So over the years, whenever we monitor the market and we realize the prices are going up on the world market, we make a request to the government that suspend this levy for a while, because we think that maybe this levy would have amassed or accrued some revenue to be able to pay for the subsidies we have on premix fuel, so that consumers can be relieved of this levy for a while. So this year, if you look at the price on the world market and what's happening on the geopolitical market, and also with the way our exchange rate is behaving, we realize that from the prices have been going up, as we have rightly said previously. So we requested for the levy to be suspended for a 3-month period. We were granted that approval. So from the 1st of April, we wrote to the industry to remove that levy from their prices. But a few days later, we were directed that it should be restored. That's a government directive. I can't so I can't give the full details as to why we were asked to restore it. So that's why it was.
What I don't understand is how a levy can stabilize price. You're saying you accrue the money, and then when there's a need, you use that money that we pay to then pay subsidies. So those subsidies are supposed to give us lower prices.
So I think it's good you've mentioned this. We've made a request to government that the name of the levy should be looked at, because the price price cannot be stabilized as long as it's exposed to external forces like exchange rates. So the name itself, one of the recommendations that the committee I mentioned made was we should change the name of this levy to reflect its use, because the name is a bit deceptive. If you say price stabilization levy, people assume that you can use to stabilize price, but we will know that there's no way you can stabilize price. The only way you can stabilize the price is to subsidize it and then pay for the subsidy. So we've asked that the name itself should be looked at, and that's one of the changes that have to be made to the name, so that the real name or the real purpose, the name can reflect that.
The last time we looked at the numbers, end of March, early April 2024, prices are the highest since February 2023. What is driving these fuel price increments?
So I think two main factors. If you look at the price build-up, the taxes, levies, and margins have remained the same. They haven't changed over the past 1 year. But then the price on the market have been changing. This is purely attributed to the world market price itself and then the exchange rate. Let's just take, for example, from January this year, the price of petrol, the benchmark price we use, was around $753 per metric ton. As we speak today for this window, it is $937 per metric ton. Same applies to diesel. Diesel was around $782 per metric ton. Today it is $841 per metric ton. So this price, as they arise on the world market, because the market is deregulated and we are directly paying for what the real cost is, and there's no subsidy, it will affect our prices. Exchange rates, I'm sure you know where it's come from January to date. So the changes we see in the price on the market is purely influenced by these two factors: the geopolitical issues and then the geopolitical issues which affect world market prices.
What weight do you apply to world price increase versus exchange rate? Because if you're saying the level of the price on the market, I'm asking because I have a little knowledge about cocoa. Cocoa prices are hovering around $9,000 per ton. If you go to Ghana, we are earning about $2,600 per ton of cocoa sold, because we sold our cocoa in the futures market. And when the futures market was sold, at the time, the price was very low. So we locked ourselves into $2,600 for a while. So even though the thing is $8,000, $9,000, we are not getting $8,000 for a ton of cocoa. Good. So now you are telling me that world price of petrol is, I don't know, crude or Brent is around 900.
So that's petrol.
It's 900.
Yeah.
But is that the price that we get it today? Or do we not buy it ahead? Is it not the same? Is there not the spot and the futures? Is there not a hedging issue? Do you understand me? Because if cocoa people can say, we will give you $2,600 per ton, even though it's $10,000 on the market, so don't expect a higher producer price of cocoa. How can you are now telling me that as for oil there's 900, so we should pay more? I won't agree. You get my point?
Yeah.
So explain that point.
So maybe to answer your question, the first question you asked was what's the weight in terms of the world market price and the exchange rate.
Yes.
So those two factors, the major factor that will influence our prices is the exchange rate. The reason is that our exchange rate moves in a certain. We've done analysis over the years, and we notice that the exchange rate moves in a certain direction. Mostly, it is going upward. The world market prices rise and fall. So if your exchange rate is always rising and you import in dollars and sell in cedis, then you would expect that your prices move in the same direction as your exchange rate. So we've had prices at around $900 before. This was the first time. But our exchange rate has moved from, we all know, very low to where they are today. So the price will rise and fall. That's the actual price of the product to rise and fall in dollars. But if your exchange rate is not stable, then you always have your domestic price. So you are very much exposed to the exchange rate volatility. But in terms of hedging, you can hedge. You can do these hedging strategies. If you are a buyer, you can usually do the call options. But as a government, you do not buy the product yourself to sell to consumers. The market is a private sector-led market. So the buyers themselves can have strategies to protect themselves in terms of how it affects their prices. I mean, their own prices. But if you are not controlling prices, remember government has tried this before. On the crude side, government hedges. So government does put options on the crude side because the share of government's production of crude oil, they hedge it so that they can get better prices. So that if prices go below a certain level, they are not exposed. As consumers, you do the call option so that you protect yourself against high prices. But because you don't consume, I mean, government doesn't buy the product itself and sell to consumers, whatever option you do, you are still exposed. Because even for options for the hedging, you pay money for it. You don't buy product directly, but you go and hedge as a government. You will make losses. I'm sure we've done this before. It didn't favor the country, so we left it as it is. But those private people who buy, they themselves protect themselves against the market prices. So I can't say right now that government can do anything to hedge the buy side. But for the sell side, which is the crude oil, we know government has strategies at the Ministry of Finance to do that.
So in terms of the weight question, if in June 2022 the cedi was selling around 6, the dollar was around 6, and now it's 13. 1 liter on the dollar side may not have changed that much, but because you now need 13 cedis to buy a dollar, you're paying 13 cedis per liter. So it means the exchange rate is a very strong factor.
Yeah, that's very
good. Now, I don't know if you have all the numbers. Ghana produces crude. I don't know if the crude we produce, we own all of it, but some of it is for us. Some people have said that if you use that crude that you produce, now you have Tor and Centu. Don't sell it on the international market for revenue. Bring it to the refinery in Tema because it's your own product. Refine it and put it on the market. At least let Goil sell it. It will make cheaper fuel available for Ghanaians, and possibly the BDCs will think of their business model and find a way of reducing the cost. Has that been discussed enough? Is this feasible just from an analytical point of view? Because I know that's not your remit. You are not in charge of energy policy. But I want you to explain how the price build-up works in the sense of if a country has its own crude and refines it, I mean, from Takrady to Tema is not far. All right? Yeah. And refines it, would it be cheaper? Because there's also cost, insurance, freight, and all those things that the BDCs incur. If you do those economics, will refining our own crude make it easier to get cheaper fuel?
So there will be some advantages there. This discussion about if you refine your own crude domestically, whether you'll be spared of the price increments on the world market has always come up, especially in Nigeria, for example, where Dangote has just bought the biggest single stream refinery in the world. It's come up, and they've explained that every refinery in the world operates on the global market, just like you mentioned cocoa, for example. We produce cocoa here, but we sell at global prices. So crude oil prices will also always go with the global prices. The advantage we would have gotten here would have been if we were getting 100% of the crude produced in Ghana as owned by government, and we have the capacity in terms of refinery capacity to refine everything here, would have been spared of the freight cost. Because if you have to go and bring the refined products from Northwest Europe or wherever to Ghana, you pay freight. So at least on the side of freight, you would have been spared to some extent. But they will still sell the crude oil in dollars. They will still sell the refined products in dollars because these refineries, the crude production companies are exposed to, or they are on the global market. They will not sell they will not produce crude and sell it in cities. That's on one side. The other side is that I think you also said we asked whether we own. Or
Yeah, but some of the
everything.
crude belongs to us.
Yes.
So if the Jubilee field produces, maybe 30% of that may be for Ghana.
That's where I'm coming to actually.
Good.
So we've done this analysis before because this question has always come up. The crude oil that's produced in Ghana is around 100,000 barrels per day. Yeah, averagely. Ghana's consumption of petroleum product is equivalent to around that same figure. But we've checked and realized that Ghana owns less than 20% of the crude that's produced in Ghana, which means that if that 20%, if government takes it and says that it will even give it to a refinery here in Ghana to produce, it will still not meet our demand. We'll still have to import close to 80% of what we need.
But can it not reduce the price?
It will play a role.
Because if government owns 20% of the crude and decides that it will refine it at Central or Tema Oil Refinery and sell that through Guel to poorer people, Total, Shell and Co may also sell, but they will find out that there's unless your point around unfair competition comes in. But a country can decide what to sell.
That is not it. So I think you are aware that the crude that is produced is managed by the Ministry of Finance, and the GMPC is the off-taker of that crude.
Yeah.
So they will also look at the value they will get from it. I remember there was a time when GMPC gave its crude oil, the share of government's crude oil, to the Tema Oil Refinery to refine. And there were issues that came out of that. So they will always also look at the value for money from their side, because they also have to report to Parliament and government as to how they maximize the profit from that crude. So if you have refining capacity and the refinery will give you the best, the fact that you put crude in a refinery doesn't mean to give you the best yield. If the refinery is not optimized properly, it's not operating at an efficient level, you can put crude in a refinery and still make losses. So just putting it in there is not 100% that you get advantage. So they will look at all of those and make a decision whether should we sell the crude as it is or should we put it in the refinery and refine it. So if producing everything here gives us the advantage, I'm sure they make that decision rather than taking it out there to sell that 18% and bring the money back, because at the end of the day, it is the financial side that they will look at. We are lucky refineries are coming back in Ghana. We have heard so many stories about working on Tema Oil Refinery to bring it back on stream. We now have a new refinery, Akwaba Refinery, which has almost the same capacity as Tema Oil Refinery, a 40,000 barrel per day refinery. Tema Oil Refinery is 45,000 barrels per day. If these refineries come back and are producing, we are getting to almost 100%, 100,000 barrels per day. And I'm sure if they do the Ministry of Finance and the GMPCs do the economics and they think they can give this crude oil to the local refineries to refine and gives us an advantage. Yeah. But I deliberately brought in the issue about Dangote, for example, because we are aware NNPC, for example, owns 20% of has 20% shares in Dangote. Just yesterday, I was having a discussion with someone from Dangote about how this even helps them their domestic price. And they've said that a refinery operates just like any other international refinery. So they will produce and then sell their products at market prices. And then governments are the ones who take decisions as to whether they would want to subsidize the prices for consumers or not if they have the ability to. So those are purely left for governments to decide.
I'm going back to the price floor because I don't agree with you. So I think NPA exists to do two things. The market must be operated fairly, but the market is not just the producers of the product. The market also includes the consumers, right? Now, I've never heard you announce a price ceiling, but you announce a price floor. Now you're saying you don't want anti-competitive behavior, so you insist on a price floor because you know the cost build-up. But companies can compete either on the basis of cost or differentiation. This is basic business knowledge. So I can run Citi FM better than Peace FM because I keep my cost low. And that's part of my competitive advantage. Now, NCA cannot come and tell me that Citi, your costs are too low. Therefore, charge this price for your advert. Citi can say, well, we have found a way of making it easier to produce morning shows. So our adverts can be cheaper than Peace FM.
So you're right.
So you cannot tell me that there should be a price floor, particularly based on the first point. I mean, the second point is also that the consumer benefits from the price. The consumer benefits from a lower price. Yeah. So what's your interest? Why are you telling me that I shouldn't have a price floor? If I want to go lower because I found a way of keeping my costs low, or have a good relationship with a supplier, or I own a vessel, NPA shouldn't be telling us to do a price floor. It's not your business.
So you're right. We don't have to control your cost. And that is why in the price floor, that cost component has been left out. It's zero in the price floor. The only factors in the price floor are the fixed cost. Like I said, if you take an OMC's price board up, the taxes they pay to GRA is fixed. They can't say, an OMC cannot say if the price stabilization for and recovery levy you mentioned, for example, 16 pesos has to be paid. They can't say they will not pay 16 pesos and that they will use 10 pesos. It's 16 pesos. So all the fixed taxes and levies are in there. But in terms of margins, that's the cost you are used for operational cost. We've left that out. In fact, industry is even questioning why we've left the cost out, because they are saying we cannot assume that you operate without a cost. But our argument is that the variations and the differentiations we see in prices because of your variations in cost.
Company so what is the fixed cost? Because isn't the cost of the finished product part of the fixed cost?
So yes, so
yeah, but I'm saying that I'm making an argument. If I have a good relationship with my supplier, based on my track record of payment, or based on some ownership relationship, they may give me. I will not transfer pricing. They may give me the crude at a cheaper price.
So you are right. So maybe you need to understand the formula well. So if you take the importer's price board up, we publish what we call the daily price indicators.
Yes,
that's a price benchmark that is used by the BDC. So every window, when they are setting their price, that price benchmark is used by all of them.
Yeah.
This $750 and $900 I mentioned is the window price benchmarks. The variations in the importers buy with these prices, and then the variations come from, if you have a good relationship with your supplier, the cost of bringing the products from the source to Ghana will vary, because we've seen contracts from companies and we see somebody can bring it in at $10, another person can bring it in at $50 based on negotiations.
Yes.
So to ensure that the consumer benefits from that variation in cost and that ability of companies to negotiate and get better prices, whether through paying early or being very reliable to their suppliers, and therefore they get those benefits, we've left that component out, so that if you were able to even buy at flat, the FOB price, that's the world market price flat, you pass it on. Also, as an importer, you have what we call the BDC margin, because you operate, you have operational costs you incur. We cannot say that we should fix the operational cost at 10 or 20, because you may be doing 5. So to ensure that the consumer still benefits from that has also been left out. They are still arguing that we can't assume that you can't have operational costs, but we don't want to be the one saying that operational cost should be 5 or should be 10. Because once we do that, then we are preventing consumers from enjoying from the benefits of being efficient or having low cost. So those two components, which are variable, have been left out.
But the point is that why are you assuming that everybody's fixed cost is the same?
We have that because this is an industry that has operated for so many years, and it's a formula they use to set their price.
But it's a dynamic market.
Yes, this formula has all these fixed costs in there for everyone. For example, every window we issue the price template for them.
Because
the control they have is the margins, which we have left out.
Abbas, somebody can enter a crowded market and compete because they found a way of making their fixed costs lower.
So I've mentioned that the cost. So you see, you are looking at fixed costs in the sense of operational cost.
No,
in that part,
why
we've
are
left.
You assuming that I'm making
so
a fixed cost? See, let's use a simple analogy. Land can be a fixed cost. All right. Equipment can be a fixed cost. The price of the raw material can be a fixed cost.
So Bernard, I think I need to help here. When we talk about fixed cost here, we are not talking about fixed cost for you as an operator, a BDC or an OMC. When you import products, for example, you pay port dues to Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority. That's what we call fixed cost. There's a service provider called the Ghana Petroleum Mooring Systems. You pay a fee to them to discharge the product.
Yeah.
And then when you put a product in the storage depot, you pay a fee for the storage depot. So an importer, that is not your cost that you can decide I would keep out. So those are the ones we are calling fixed costs.
Because you fix the price at 13.02.
Yes, so that is based on the world market price, the benchmark I mentioned, and the cost like GPMS fee, port dues, storage fees. Those are the ones that have been added.
I understand, but
now,
the world market price, I'm saying that the world market price may be the same for everybody, but people can, through negotiation and relationship, get it cheaper.
And that is why we leave out the additional cost. You see, there's a formula for pricing petroleum products in Ghana. So we are not assuming that everyone just comes up with their own price using a different formula. This industry has always operated with the formula. And this formula has this cost in there. That's why we publish the daily price indicators, like I mentioned earlier. And that's what guides the price. If you look at the pricing guidelines, for example, it has always had a benchmark
So is
prices.
the price floor a demand by industry or a regulator rule? Is it the industry that's asking you to give them a price floor?
The price floor is a response to the unhealthy competition. So first of all, like I said, when we analyze the
unhealthy for who?
When we for the industry, in the sense that we have costs piling up. So this is what's happening. Bernard, companies go and buy products, and OMC goes to buy products from a BDC. We see the price they bought at from the BDC, for example. And then when they put that price in the price formula, that's their extra final price. And the only thing they add is their margin, which covers their cost of doing business. So that one, from zero to whatever, you can decide to vary your margins because company A's overhead cost may be higher than company B's overhead cost. Now you see them selling at prices, even if they didn't have a margin at all. Let's say that I'm so efficient, or I even want to be for that Christmas, so I'm not putting a cost for myself. The price they sell because of unhealthy competition are way lower than what they bought at and adding the taxes. So the question is, how is this company able to even pay the person he bought the product at?
God is still in a miracle business.
And so as a regulator, we can't say that we can see unhealthy competition going on, but because consumers are enjoying, we should leave it aside. Like I said earlier, if that happens, the industry crumbles and then there's no availability. So we have to address that.
Historically, have you also had a price ceiling where you say, no matter what happens, don't go above this price?
So
Has that happened?
So we had that when we were doing the price, before price regulation. So we said what we call the maximum indicative price, where companies cannot sell above.
But you don't do that anymore.
But since we did price regulation, I'm happy you spoke about
the
competition.
But how can you do price regulation and have a price floor?
So
that doesn't make sense. And the regulation is not, I mean, again, you see, I'm being basic, but you are technical on the oil. Basic economics, a deregulated market, the government doesn't control price. So let people sell at the price they want. You say no, they shouldn't sell below a certain price. But you are saying when it comes to higher price there, you are deregulated, so that is not your business.
So Bernard, I'm happy
you are saying that. You are being hypocritical.
No, I'm happy you are saying that because you see, when we look at price regulation, look at the context in which we did price regulation. When we did price regulation in 2015, what changed? What changed was the fact that the formula that we use has not changed, but when we're regulating price, we set the margins for the BDCs. We set the premium they pay to their supplier.
How is that deregulation?
We determined, no, that was regulation. That was what we were doing.
Okay, yeah.
So we were doing that. We set the premium they pay to their supplier. The FOB benchmark still remained. Then we set the premium they pay to their supplier, even though they negotiated that it's varied. And then we set the margin they use. That we are assuming that all of you use the same cost. So we set the margin for them. We also apply the same exchange rate for all. And then when it comes to the OMCs, we assume that all of them are buying at the same price from the BDC, so it was set. And then we also assume their margins are the same when we set that for them as well. When we did price regulation, the things that changed was that premium they negotiated with their suppliers, we left that out. So we say that if Bernard yours is $20, put 20. If Richard's own is 10, he should put 10. Then he gives there's competition. The cost that you add, the way you said efficiency comes in. Previously, we assume one cost for all. Under price regulation, we leave that out and say if your cost is lower, you put a lower cost. If it is higher, you use a higher cost. Exchange rate. If you're able to go and get a better exchange rate than Richard, we don't see why we should set one exchange rate for all of you. So you use the rate that gives you advantage. So there has been variations in your price as imported to the OMCs. Now for OMCs too, in the formula, all the taxes and levies are fixed in the formula. Where the variation comes is that previously we set the margin for them. Now we don't do that. We leave it. So that is still there. So the price floor, that's why the price floor excludes these variables that led to means price regulation. So nobody is still setting any margin for any BDC. Nobody is determining the rate a BDC should use.
What you've done is at best partial deregulation.
So yes, it has been partial deregulation since 2015.
But I mean, you're not a politician, so I don't want to push too much. But I feel like the whole deregulation is a sleight of hand the politicians use to take pressure off themselves. So because they politicize fuel prices when in opposition, when they come to government, they can't manage it. Therefore, they came up with this whole hoax that they are doing price deregulation, which is really not true. Because
Bernard,
you are saying you are deregulating only the margins. In which business do you regulate margins?
But that's how. No,
yeah,
so
the whole thing
that was what we're doing. We're doing at regulation. Now
you are not deregulated. You are just partially regulated.
So deregulation that has stopped, and that's why immediately we did price regulation. You saw something happen on our market. Now we see price differentiation. Prior to price regulation, I'm sure you used to buy fuel in 2015. Before June 2015, you would have seen the price the same everywhere. But immediately we did price regulation, now you can see price variation.
But
and that's because they
theoretically, the purpose of deregulation is for competitive forces to force prices down.
And the competition is in their cost, like you said.
Yeah, but the prices are not coming down. They've been going up.
But Bernard, whether the exchange rate, like we've discussed already, the prices, these are businessmen. If the exchange rate has gone up, you cannot expect the price to come down.
My point is that I'm not criticizing Abbas, or I'm saying that the policy of deregulation, if you look at the behavior of petroleum prices for the past decade and a half, has not succeeded. It's not really.
But Bernard, the objective of price regulation was not to bring down prices.
It was to
ensure that one, the subsidies that government was subsidizing was not able to pay was taken away. That's
their motive. But what they told us in selling it, you see, this is the thing.
I was part of the committee that worked on the price regulation.
They came on air and said to us that one of the reasons why they were deregulating was that it will force competition, and competition reduces prices. That's what they said to us.
But we are having that today, like you mentioned earlier.
But prices are going up.
The prices are going up because the variables that go into the price exchange. When we did price regulation in 2015, what was the exchange rate?
You can't do.
Today the exchange rate is 13.
You can't regulate what you don't control. You
don't
control the exchange rate.
And that is why it's so the deregulation is actually making you pay for the real price of a consumer petroleum product. Previously, what was happening was the price will rise. The time we're regulating prices, it didn't mean prices were not rising, and that's why there was subsidy.
But my point is that
so the prices will rise, but government subsidizes.
Again, I'm not making just a petroleum argument. I'm saying that petroleum is probably the product with the greatest pass-through effect of all products.
Yes, that's true.
It's one of the leading drivers of inflation. So for an overall economic policy management, if you don't have a hand on your exchange rate, you are going to destroy your economy. So if you come up with this whole I'm deregulating, you don't even have a price ceiling in a high interest rate environment. You're killing consumers.
So Bernard, what if you want to do a price ceiling right now? What it means is that in the deregulated market, I have to cap the margin the company can, the cost
in
the
a
company,
regulated market.
You know, if you do that, then we are regulating.
Yes.
And that is why what we have done is not regulating their margins, because if
but regulate it because it's affecting us. Why?
So if I regulate,
is there any law?
Remember, if you will do that, then it means now you are regulating the price.
Yeah, but what's wrong with that?
But if you regulate prices and the price has to go beyond a certain limit, and you say don't go below it, then beyond it, then you have to subsidize.
No, you don't have
so,
to.
But
those who want to play in the
so you see, on one hand, you are arguing about the fact that we should allow market forces to determine prices.
I am saying that put the consumer,
and that's what we have allowed.
I am saying that inflation is your number one eroder of value in a country. Exchange rate depreciation is the driver of inflation. So if you want to keep prices stable, and price stability is the object of economic policy management. So if you claim that you want to manage an economy, don't come up with this hoax of deregulation just to take away the political connotation of it.
Maybe, Bernard, we are mixing the issues.
Possibly.
So we are mixing the issues in the sense that petroleum product pricing deregulation and exchange rate volatility are two different issues.
So they are related.
Yeah, they are related, but they are two different issues. If you look at NPA, NPA's mandate is to regulate the petroleum sector. Exchange rate is used to pay for the cost of product.
I understand that.
It doesn't affect only petroleum.
I'm not saying
NPA
should regulate.
Maybe if government, that's a government decision.
I'm talking to government, not to NPA.
Okay.
And I'm not saying NPA should regulate. You see, Sky, I'm making a point.
You see, the
NPA has been the arrowhead for government's economic, government petroleum policy at the downstream level. And the deregulation was sold for specific reasons.
Exactly.
I'm saying
but
that when you look at...
It would be good to mention those reasons so that we don't mix the issues.
There were many.
No, I can mention them to you because we're very clear about the objective of price regulation.
Give them to
One,
me.
to ensure that subsidies which were unpaid were addressed because they were leading shortages of petroleum products.
That's number
Two,
one.
because government were fixing the exchange rate for the BDCs. When we use we used to use a BOG exchange rate.
Yeah.
Now use a BOG exchange rate, they sell, and by the time they are buying the dollar,
Yeah.
the city has depreciated further, and that's what led to the FX losses the BDCs incurred.
Yeah.
So this, and then because of the unpaid subsidies, there were liquidity issues for them.
Yeah.
Because they sell, the product has to be sold at 12 cedis, tell them sell at 10 cedis. The 2 cedis will take forever to pay.
Yeah.
It was leading to their inability to pay the banks.
Yeah.
So at a point, we had products.
No, let me finish my. Let me also make my point. Okay. And you are not in control of exchange rates.
That's very true.
What you do as government, and you see when I say government, I'm not talking about NPA alone.
Okay.
So, for example, BOG has a relationship with BDCs, which is not NPA. BOG can decide how it gives dollars to who and who it does not. I am saying that overall economic policy, whether it's petroleum policy, deregulation policy, should agree to a macro policy that makes people's lives better. Before you came on, I was just reading about cost of living crisis. Inflation is high, food prices are high, transport fares are high. All these things are affecting consumers. So from a consumer perspective, I'm saying deregulation has only delivered for the industry. It doesn't deliver for us.
But there were shortages. Industry consumers are now availability has been a big problem.
Not a problem.
You remember last year, Nigeria faced an issue of shortages.
Yeah, but you see, don't use shortages to we are saying that okay.
But the consumer is interested in availability too.
If it gets to 20 cities, I may not be able to pay. It can be. You see, there's always availability, accessibility, and affordability. So you see, don't just queue to availability. For power, everything there are 3 A's. It must be available. I understand. It must be accessible. I understand. But if available and accessible, I cannot afford it. It's still not there. So the object of any policy, whether it's regulation policy, energy policy, is to make all those 3 A's. I'm saying, from a consumer perspective, it's not affordable. I can even argue it's not accessible. It's available, but it will be in the tanks. So again, you are here as NPA, so I can't ask you every question. But I also cannot we cannot circumscribe a discussion about petroleum to only NPA. Because there's also petroleum commission.
The exchange rate is a key factor.
That's my point. So you deal with the issues as it affects to what you regulate. And the ones that are beyond your pay grade, you can tell me that, bro, this one is not my decision.
Honestly, that's what we do. That's why we leave exchange rates out.
Charlie, that's exactly what I was trying to come in with. Because you are a technical person sitting here. Your job is not to come and speak to the FX issues, because clearly that's outside your remit. That's a matter that Dr. Baumia would have to be answering the questions for. The Bank of Ghana or the finance minister would have to deal with, the president himself. But if you stray into that area, then it becomes problematic. So you stay, of course, the FX issue is a big issue.
But I think I admitted that FX affects prices, which you have no control
over. Okay, let's make it nice.
Yes.
What is the NPA's recommendation for dealing with a renegade dollar? Is there a way in which, based on your understanding of the way the petroleum sector works, we can shield ourselves from the volatility of FX from the NPA perspective?
I'm happy you brought this in. In 2022, looking at the way how FX affects our industry. Previously, the Bank of Ghana organizes forex auctions for the whole banking sector.
Thank you.
It doesn't focus on industries. We went to make a case and said that for the petroleum sector,
Wonderful.
looking at the way the petroleum sector affects inflation and every other thing in the country, let's see what we can do to ensure that even though we cannot fix a rate for the petroleum sector, let's have a way where you can provide forex for the petroleum sector so that their rates can be better than what the other industries do. And remember when we were pushing for this, BOG didn't want to do it because in their view, if you do that, the other sectors can also come and make a case that do that. And they don't have enough reserves to do that for everyone. But luckily for us, we were able to convince government to do it. So from 2022, BOG started doing what we call the FX auctions for the oil sector. So the BDCs every 2 weeks have a special FX auction that is done for them. With this FX auction BOG does, it gives them a rate that is better than what they get from the market. The unfortunate thing is that because BOG does not have enough reserves, they don't get 100% of what they need from BOG. But it's a little bit of support. So if you look at the FX rate that the last auction gave last week, the rate was 13.22. We all know that even spot rates today is above that. So it gives them some support from there. If BOG was able to give them 100%, we would have been happy about that. What that does is that it gives certainty to pricing. When a BDC has bought in product and has to price in cedis and doesn't know the rate at which he will buy the dollar when he finishes selling, he has to kind of, in a way, speculate.
Super.
So to avoid that speculation, that's why we brought in the FX auctions for our industry. We are just praying that we'll get to the point where these FX auctions that BOG has negotiated for our industry, they'll be able to meet 100% of their rates so that when BDCs are pricing, they have certainty to
Two questions which
rates.
may not necessarily be NPA, but I think I like where you're going. So I want to ask you, has gold for oil helped in stabilizing the exchange rate? If you have the answer, yes. If you don't, I won't push too much. Number two, there's a conversation around increasing what they call the optimal reserve ratio, where when you get gold, you increase your volume of gold as a central bank. Because if you look at the relationship of the gold to the dollar, gold has been stronger. So then the reserves of the BOG is enough to serve as a buffer to prevent currency depreciation. Was the NPA involved at all in gold for oil? Has there been an analysis of gold for oil in terms of its ability to either stabilize the exchange rate at all or make it easier to get cheaper products on the market?
Yeah, so gold for oil, I think it runs on what the BOG calls the gold purchase program. Previously, BOG buys gold from the gold producers and then keeps reserves and liquidates them. Now, the gold for oil policy was to run on what we call the gold dory. So these licensed gold exporters have to export their gold. Those ones didn't used to come to BOG directly. Now, what the gold for oil policy did was that this gold dory that the licensed gold exporters export on their own and the dollars doesn't come to the BOG reserves, BOG should consolidate, or let me say aggregate that. PMMC does that, the Precious Mineral Marketing Company aggregates that. Now, gold for oil, which BOST is doing, meets about 30% of our forex demand. Previously, they will also come to BOG for dollars to cover this 30% of what they are importing. Now, they don't demand that dollar from G4O, from Bank of Ghana, from its reserves. So what they do is they use the gold purchase program, and that's why if you remember last year, the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources banned the exportation of this gold dory. So all of this gold dory is brought to the BOG through the PMMC, and it sells that gold. So they pay them in cedis at a certain rate. So that CD rate is what is used to price the oil that comes through the gold for oil program. So this gold dory that has been bought from the licensed gold exporters is liquidated, sold outside, and the dollar is used to pay for the oil. So now it has relieved BOG of that pressure of going into its reserves to provide that 30% of oil, the cost of paying for oil from the gold. That's why the BOG governor said that the gold for oil has helped in stabilizing FX to some extent because 30% of our oil imports has been taken off there. So even what we've done is that we've even proposed to government that looking at the advantages this has given BOST through the gold for oil program, let's expand it to cover all our imports, even the private sector imports, because we've been told that there's enough gold dory to cover all our imports. So when this is done, so there have been discussions as to bringing in more gold dory through that process, so that the BDCs can even bring their CDs, because they're not getting 100% of what they need through the BOG auctions. So they bring in their CDs to the gold purchase program. The gold is used to sold and then dollars given back to them.
Last question. Duncan Amo, Executive Secretary of Shimba, is predicting, now we are 14.99. That's what gold is selling petrol, and 14.80. He's predicting that in the coming months, a liter of petrol will sell above 16 cedis. Does MP also do projections like this? Is he speaking the truth? If he is, what can be done to prevent this or to manage it better? So it's a lot of questions in one.
Yeah, so first of all, NPA also does projections, because even the first projection we do is the daily price indicators we project. The daily price indicators, this is what tells you the direction of prices for the next window. So as we speak right now, the next window starts on the 1st of May. But you've already given the daily price indicators to give an idea of where the world market is going, which influence our prices, because that's the benchmark we use locally. We've also shown where the exchange rate is going. So just looking at the direction of these two, it tells you whether price will go up or go down. What NPA doesn't do when we do our projections to announce our projections.
Okay.
Because as a regulator, when we announce our projections, it influences the market. In the deregulated market, you don't want to be the one saying price will go to 16 or 17, and some people may even push their prices there. So we keep our projections to ourselves. We use that to monitor the market to see whether prices are being computed in response or in conformity with the prescribed petroleum pricing formula. So if anybody knows that prices are going up on the world market and they say the price will go up, it is to go up. But as which figure it will go to, as someone who is not, first of all, the market is deregulated. So companies can use different margins, like you've said, different costs. So you cannot say the price will be 16 or 17. So we don't mention figures.
Average prices.
So averages,
but if the prices continue, will the NPA advise government on what to do in terms of maybe remove some of the taxes or something? Is that within your remit? Are you able to recommend to the political authority? Because you know the effect of the price directly. So if you see the trend going up, are you able to make any recommendations like suspend this levy or that levy so that the price is good? Are you able to do that kind of thing?
The levy that is used for that is the price abatement and recovery levy, and that's why we usually make the request for it to be removed, and that's what we did recently. Unfortunately, we were asked to restore it, so I'm sure government is aware, because we made the case as to why it should be removed. So the decision for government to say we should bring it back until maybe they are okay to say that I can now remove it, we would wait for that directive from government.
Last question from Sky. You said cylinder recirculation model.
Yeah, that's right.
What's the question? How is it going?
So LPG and related issues, there are so many problems in the specific sector subsector we're talking about. What is the very latest on the matter? Because there are concerns emerging that it is not going as you actually intended.
Okay, so cylinder recirculation model, as we all know, is a model that has been brought to ensure that we increase access to LPG. Currently, we have the regular retail outlets mostly located in the urban areas. So if you go to the rural areas, you hardly see any LPG retail outlet there. In my village in Pasa, for example, if you need LPG, you have to travel to Nkonta before you can buy LPG. That's extra cost for the consumer. So in our attempt to ensure that we increase the usage of LPG, first, it's cleaner for the environment. It's also cleaner for you as a consumer. It's easy to use, and also we increase our consumption. It helps the businesses. So what we've done is that the cylinder recirculation model now brings in the system where the LPG is bottled in cylinders at a bottling plant, automated bottling plant, and these are taken to what we call the cylinder exchange points. These cylinder exchange points is just having a cage, and then you have the LPG there. So the consumer, all you come is that also under this model, you don't buy the cylinder. The cylinder is paid for through the model. So as a consumer, all you come is you take the cylinder, you bring back the empty cylinder, and you go. So now cylinder exchange points are so cheap to establish. So they can be established in a lot more parts of the country, rural areas. And also these people don't have to buy cylinders. So getting LPG, so that affordability is one of the tenets of this policy. Access is one of the tenets, and then availability. Availability and access is being done through the CRM. Affordability is something we continue to do. To engage government that CRM, LPG want to increase its demand. Currently, just about 30% national demand. The target is to increase it to 50% at least. So if we do this, then it helps us to. So as we speak, we have 4 bottling plants. 4 bottling plants. One has been built in Kumasi by Gore, and we have 3 in Tema, which are ready now to start operation. We have already identified stations that are going to start doing the cylinder exchange. The exchange points, they've been established. We've approved the locations. Now, the value chain requires that, like I mentioned, the bottling plant is a new player in the industry. And in this industry, once you invest, there's a margin or a cost line that you incur. Previously, we didn't used to have bottling plants. So once we have bottling plants, there has to be a margin that will pay for the operational cost, because someone has constructed a bottling plant, has to operate it. Just like when you build a filling station, you operate, and therefore OMCs have margins. The bottling plant also needs a margin. Like I said, the cylinder has to be paid for. It has to be paid, so a consumer doesn't have to pay for the cylinder. So what we have called the cylinder bottling plant margin, cylinder investment margin, has been added to the price of LPG. But obviously, once you do that, it makes LPG price expensive. So
do you still subsidize premix?
Yes, premix is still subsidized.
Yeah, but
So with the LPG, so what we did was, if you just add $80 per metric ton to the price of LPG, it makes it expensive. Yes, it is needed to ensure that the value chain is covered, but we can't leave it that way. So our consumers, because of CRM, have to pay more for LPG. So we have to NPA to look at innovative ways of bringing down the cost of LPG. Apart from talking to governments to reduce the taxes or even remove the tax on LPG, even if you not subsidize it, we introduced what we call the LPG tender, competitive tender system. Previously, the importers will import LPG in smaller quantities on their own, which made it more expensive to import. So from January this year, we changed the approach. We said we consolidate all your quantities to one, and then we tender it. So the company that can deliver at the least premium will deliver it to all of us. Previously, we used to import it around almost $100 per metric ton added to the FOB price. The first tender we did brought it to about $30 per metric ton, which was a huge saving. So that helps us to bring in the cost, that's the $80 cost, so that the consumer is not overburdened, so that we pay more for LPG.
Abbas Tasunti is the head of
Economic regulation.
Economic regulation. It's a real joy having you on the show. You should do this more often, because NPA ran away from public discourse when he claimed it was deregulating. But somehow you are coming back into the public limelight, and we are very happy with that. And we encourage you and the other colleagues to do more, so people can understand what happens in the sector. So thank you for being on the program.
Thank you very much for your time.
You are released.